Hey.
Hey.
We're back.
We're back.
And together. That's a thing.
We're sitting in the new basement with a new sort of setup. This is sort of like the no table setup. We'll see how we like this.
I like it.
Yeah.
As long as I have lumbar support, man. This is...
Well, I just thought if you had brought snacks, or if anybody had brought snacks, which I think we sometimes do at our year-end episodes, or maybe it was just the SchmeeVee Awards that got...
Maybe.
Yes, but...
we fancy for that.
Yes, right. Right, exactly. So hopefully this won't feel disorienting or alienating. Ronald, you're a little further away from me than you normally are.
I know.
But
I was going to bring smoked mussels, but I just paid for movers. Mm-hmm. We just paid for movers.
Trade-off, like, do I move my things, or do I get smoked mussels for Steve and John?
Yeah.
I think you made the wrong choice.
I know.
You could always get your stuff moved later, but I understand.
Priorities have always been an issue with you, but
one day you'll learn.
Telling me.
It's an ongoing process.
You're telling me.
And who are you?
I'm Ron.
And do you hear that dog barking?
Yes.
What dog?
You don't hear the dog? Steve.
You know what's crazy?
I'm Steve. You're John, right?
I'm John, the guy whose dog is barking.
And this is Movie Schmoovie, just in case you didn't know.
Whenever you say
and
that...
I mean my actual dog is upstairs barking, not that my feet hurt.
Like, whenever you say that, I never hear it on the podcast.
That's because of the magic of his editing.
Oh, okay.
It's about 50-50. Sometimes I am really worried about it, and it's not as audible, but there are times where we just let it go, and it's just raging in the background. So
I like it. It gives some atmosphere.
Yes, definitely.
Of dogs.
I'm sure... As the audio engineer of this podcast, I can tell you that's not the kind of atmosphere that you want.
Well, you'd be wrong, sir.
Do you remember when had
this podcast started?
Crickets?
What was our goal? Dogs.
Yeah.
Atmosphere.
Yes.
It's chaos.
And 245
Yes.
episodes later. Thank you, John.
Did you guys see the painting Dogs Playing Poker? And you said that's the vibe we want to create.
Yeah.
We saw that and we were like, let's make a podcast. One day we'll get that. And maybe we'll even get like feet running around.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right now there appears
this is
to be
like authentic dog background.
There's a stampede of sock feet and clawed feet. Yes, we're in the middle of recording.
Oh.
I was gonna let her out the side door because I didn't think you started.
Maybe.
All right. Well, we can
This
pause.
is as legit as it gets right here.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's a live dog in the studio right now.
Here comes another one.
And when you can only have one, we would request
Hello.
Hey, can you believe she's not even 1 year old yet?
two. Wow.
Wow.
Oh, you're beautiful.
She is a big puppy.
You're a beautiful puppy girl.
Hey. Hey.
Hey, buddy.
It seems like they get along, right?
They can go crazy with each other, but it's like when they're chill, you see how
good.
yeah.
Oh.
I think in the balance of things, it's good for him to have a dog buddy around. But in general, there are times where he looks at us like, "What did you guys do? Why did you guys do the dog?" Hey Nikki, am I gonna have to come help corral them? She's just dipped out.
She's like, they're going to just hang out for the episode.
They sound like they're having fun. Come on, guys. Go Betty, Sally. Do you remember when we had crickets?
Yeah.
Yes.
There was like, and I remember thinking it was going to be that way every time,
Yeah.
and there was no editing around that.
Yeah.
And I think within a few weeks, like the temperature changed enough so that like crickets weren't singing at 7 o'clock, you know, which is when we were recording for a while. So it's like it just faded out. But I remember the next year when it came around again, I was like, there was no resolution to that. It was just that the crickets stopped doing it. But there was like one in one of these window wells or something, and it's just crazy. What is going on upstairs?
They're so small and so loud.
John's about to implode right now.
Yeah.
Look at this. Look at him sweating.
I think they're about to let the dogs out and then take them upstairs.
Wait, who?
Who
Let the dogs out?
No, the question this time was who let the dogs in to the basement.
So they were out already.
Yes, right. They were out, not causing problems. Someone let them in. No, they were out of this room, I mean.
That's such a funny song, Who Let the Dogs Out.
Did you watch a documentary about that song?
No.
Did they finally reveal who did it?
Wait.
No.
Yeah, no, that is the white one. The one that had it premiered at the film festival, the Maryland Film Festival. It's literally, I think, called like "Who Let the Dogs Out."
Oh, really?
No.
It's basically about how like they like stole that song.
Really?
Oh, it's brutal. Like,
Jeez.
find out what it was called. I watched it back in the summer, but
All right. So if people are hearing dogs at this point, just accept that Sully and Betty are sort of like mascots.
They're looming.
Yes.
Yeah,
Lurking, maybe.
Yes,
I don't know.
True.
Depends how they're feeling tonight.
But this is episode 245.
That's correct.
It's a big deal.
This is one of our kind of year in review episodes. This will be our looking at the best television shows of 2019 episode. So a lot of hours have gone into preparing for this one. Did anybody cram on any shows before, or did you just sort of go with what you had been watching throughout the year? Did you feel that urge?
Yeah, no, I feel like I kind of just went with my gut on what I'd seen or had just recently finished up. I mean, there wasn't much that I kind of had missed entirely that I felt like I had to see.
Right.
I mean, there may be a couple that I may visit later and be like, damn, I should have watched that. But I think overall, the TV portion of our year-in review that we do, I was less stressed about. Because I actually was really on top of shows this year when they aired.
Oh, wow.
And those that I wasn't, like I caught up with pretty quickly when they kind of came to a season's end. Like movies, like I did a lot more cramming for our next episode. But like this was something where I was like, rolled into the holiday and the new year being like,
Yeah.
I'm pretty good with what I'm going to pick as my top 3. So,
Yeah.
what about you, Ronald?
I'm just kind of telling you before, like this was the hardest. I've consumed more TV than I have movies, just because there's been so much TV,
Right.
of all genres, and I think this is probably the most diverse list I've ever made, just in terms of types of shows and. Yeah, so I've consumed a lot of this. Is the most 2019. I've watched more shows than I have in my entire life.
In a year.
In a year, yeah.
Or you watched more this year than you've ever watched in your life.
Well, I sent you guys that headline. I didn't actually read the full report, but that supposedly there were over 500 scripted television shows in 2019.
And
I believe it.
All of them were on Netflix.
Now,
all of them starred as someone that used to be on the CW.
or were written by Tyler Perry.
Yeah, yes. By the way, he writes all of his scripts.
He doesn't have writers' rooms, which a lot of people
And
say
shows.
is shitty because he's a guy who could. I mean, he's starting this kind of new Hollywood in Atlanta with a studio
That may
that's in
change.
Atlanta, right?
Yeah,
But,
it may
but
change.
the idea that he's not giving a leg up to a diverse writers' room, it's a little bit of a glory hound thing. But I think his whole point is just you got to do the work.
Yeah.
But I think the funny thing is. He posted this tweet. It was pictures of all the scripts he wrote in 2019. And he was sort of saying, I wrote all these to brag. And somebody said, that's kind of like bragging after you've like taken a shit that messed up your friend's plumbing. I did that. You know, that it's like we all know what the general consensus is about the quality of Tyler Perry's efforts. I don't know if that's fully fair, but I do think that like
Weird flex, but okay.
Yeah, exactly. That's the ultimate weird flex, but okay. But I felt like this year I watched more shows than I normally do, and yet there were still shows that I couldn't include on my list because I didn't finish them, or I didn't watch all the episodes that were available. A few shows I saw like a brilliant pilot or a brilliant episode or two, but I thought I'll get back to that, and I kind of never did. Because there are so many different reasons you might like a television show. And I might be really engaged by something that I don't even think is that great when I take a step back from it, but the act of being pulled into a show and wanting to watch the next one, and if you do hit a binge, that binge where it gets the hooks in you and you start going, I guess I can watch 6 episodes before I go to bed, you know? Like, I think there is something magical about that, and this year I would say there were more than usual of shows that I watched where I was like, I'm not even sure how I feel about this, but I'm completely engrossed in it.
Yeah.
And I actually will start off because one of those such shows is one of my picks. So I'll get us going with a show that really, I kind of picked shows that I thought would just be fun to talk about because there's a lot of great shows out there, but I think we're all watching or have watched every episode of Servant, right? On Apple TV Plus. Yeah, Servant. What a weird show, but what an interesting show, and what an engrossing show, and what an addictive show. I watched it with like my skepticism filter way up because it's in that M. Night Shyamalan mold of mystery. And with a television show, you can stretch that out more than just 2 hours. You know, you can spend years. And I did read somewhere in a dispiriting little bit of information that he views it going 6 seasons and 60 episodes. So this 10-episode season that just started is almost over. So I say this at the point where we don't really know what the season finale is going to be. So I actually feel like this is possibly the best moment to be interested in Servant,
Yeah.
because the season finale is probably when something happens that will tip us off to the twist or something where we will begin to know if this show really has the goods. So I guess actually the day this episode comes out, I will be finding out or will have found out whether I would still put it on my list. But I was shocked at how much I was into this show, especially given the fact that there are elements on it that don't even make sense to me. Particularly the lead performance, perhaps we might call it, of Lauren Ambrose as Dorothy. It is a crazy performance, but I will say that in the most recent episode, it was the first time I started to go, okay.
Yeah, that's why
I kind of think I get why she's so heightened.
Yeah.
However, I still feel like she's doing something very bizarre as an actress, which is it's really kind of testing the patience of the viewer with just how many expressions she can have while she's saying a line and how much she can like move her body around. I mean, she's being very expressive, and I guess that's a conscious choice. But I guess I'll throw it to you guys before I say much else. What do you think about Servant? Do you feel similarly to me that like despite its flaws, it's got this weird. As I often want to say about something that I just enjoyed, is like a hypnotic effect. There's something that draws you in on this show.
I've kind of talked about this a little bit in terms of what I think that Apple TV Plus is doing, and I think if I were to classify it in a type of content category, I'd say it's like baby HBO, in the way that like it has these very niche things. It's very distinct. I've never seen anything like it. It commits to it enough. It's well filmed. The actresses and actors are always pretty incredible, and this feels like that. And for a first set of offerings, for this to be the
talent
first,
that they bring in, like really we even said before Apple TV is Apple TV Plus or Apple Plus TV. This is
Apple TV Plus.
Apple TV Plus.
Yeah.
That it was like announcement after announcement, which felt like for over a year.
Yeah.
felt ridiculous.
Of just this
right?
crazy talent that they were getting. And I will say that's one thing that unifies all the shows I've seen is the production values are crazy.
Yeah.
And in that sense, it's not, I wouldn't say that it's better than HBO production values, but there is something about these shows that has like a shimmer to it or something. They just are crisp.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to be too bowled over by just the fact that they had, nice cameras or whatever and good lighting, but it is interesting that they came to market with the offerings, as you said, that sometimes it almost feels like there's an act of faith in saying this is a show that we're going to present you with 10 episodes or however many.
Yeah.
Who knows if this show goes to 6 seasons, but it is not created necessarily by M. Night Shyamalan. It's co-created by him or co-executive produced. He directed a few episodes, but his mark is all over it. His kind of camera work and the pacing of his reveals is all over it. So I think we can say it falls into his kind of the twist is going to determine the quality of the story, and it does feel like there's a twist coming. But I would say in the most recent episode, we got something of a twist reveal, which is the question we'd been asking, which throughout this series, we know before the series started, this couple played by Toby Kebbell and Lauren Ambrose, Sean and Dorothy, they lost their baby who was 13 weeks old. And they have been coping, or she has been coping from her extreme emotional breakdown after losing the baby with something that's a real thing. I think they're called, what are they called? Reborn dolls. There's some process by which it's not shiny, hard plastic. It looks more like skin. Yeah. There's different things they do. They weigh them a little bit heavier so that it feels like the weight of a real baby. Yeah. And some people collect them because they're super rare, but some people use them for a short time to cope with losing a baby because there's like a physical need to be close, especially for the mother of a baby that they've given birth to. And this movie picks up with that premise of a couple that has a reborn doll, which I feel like whoever created the show must have just seen an article about these things, and the idea kind of writes itself, because I did a little deep dive before I watched the show, and I was like, holy shit, this is real. And I actually did a little background check to make sure this wasn't a Wikipedia page set up by the show, like some kind of Blair Witch promotion back in the day made to look real. Right. But so that premise of then they bring in a nanny to take care of the doll, which keeps up the illusion, because the mother, who this whole doll illusion is for, she's not just using the reborn doll as a coping mechanism. She seems to think her child is still alive. She's sort of blipped over. She won't accept the moment when she knew that her child was dead. Yeah. And we spend many, many episodes seeing her acting in this very intense, extreme way. And we finally find out like what actually happened, and you can see why it might have caused these things. But the premise of the show, the creepy premise, is what happens when this nanny shows up. And then I won't say too much more to anybody that hasn't watched it, but
things start happening.
Unexplained things start happening. It's a dark, sad idea.
Yeah.
And I was almost glad in the beginning of the show that they didn't deal too much with the mechanics and the story around the baby actually dying, because I thought to myself, I don't know that I want to watch that. And I thought we'd been spared that. But as they've kind of flashed back, we have caught up with the horrible way that it happened. Have you seen the most recent one, Ronald?
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you think they handled that?
This is one of those shows that the less you know, I kind of wish we could say, hey, this is all kind of spoilery, even the premise, because like if you look at the marketing for it, they don't really talk about anything,
right?
Besides the fact that there's a baby.
Right.
So I'd say, for what you're given and what the way that they handle all that stuff, I think it's really good storytelling. I mean, for what it is, I think it's some of the better storytelling, especially when it comes to like the horror genre. If you want to put it in the suspense horror genre of TV show, I mean, the only thing I can really compare it to is the show you guys like. What's it called?
Haunting Hill.
House of Haunting Hill.
Just in terms
Haunting
of
of
like,
Hill House.
Just good storytelling.
House of Haunting Hill.
Yeah, there aren't too many TV shows that I would compare it to besides just really good storytelling on that. So
Yeah,
the way that they handle the unraveling of whatever happens that day, when Aaron figured out what was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the key. Like John was saying, like I feel like
It's subtle as hell.
If you learn that too early in the season, it's like that's really like sad and like sure you don't want to spoil anything, but like something happens and like
well, we know that the baby's dead, so it can't be anything happy. You know something
right. You
bad
don't want to
happened.
know that too soon because like that's not really what the show is about.
Right.
Like the show is not about the event that happened. It's about what's happening now.
Yeah.
And like the questions around it, the mystery around it. But all these things, are happening in some sort of concert where like there's some connection between everything and all these seeds are being planted where you're wondering and you're trying to connect some dots, but then you get to the point that you actually are told what happened. And like so much stuff makes sense in terms of behavior and the lead performances from Laura Ambrose specifically, and just that character, like some things kind of make more sense and like it makes it even sadder.
Right.
And
no, it takes it from the realm of like the kind of possibly supernatural horror that I'm talking about and puts it in the realm of like, this is just a psychological drama and it's a tragic drama,
Right.
And I will still say that it's got that M. Night quality, and I was joking with you guys about this, about how people just don't say things that people say. Like, even beyond the sort of this is a heightened situation, there's a weird dynamic and there's weird dialogue and there's a weird I found myself sometimes bumping up against these sort of awkward exchanges between people, but the acting is pretty good. At least interesting. Even Lauren Ambrose, who can be a bit much, it's interesting to see. But I thought that especially as he got to show more of his emotional underpinnings, Toby Kebbell is doing some pretty subtle, like solid work. A lot of times, if you're playing the kind of distant, aloof character, it's hard to find the heart of that character. But I think we are seeing that this guy's not just a stiff. Yeah. And then I think Rupert Grint is a big surprise.
He's nuts.
Ron Weasley, who he's not quite pulling off an American accent. But he's doing that sort of American accent that British guys can do, where it's all very overpronounced, But it's an interesting thing just seeing he's so Ron Weasley of any. You know what I mean? Like to see him in any other role is always a little bit weird for me, and he seems to be really kind of playing against that type. It's really kind of fun to watch him. Yeah, it's like a performance that I dig. So
it's a solid show, man.
And the actress that plays the nanny, she was on Game of Thrones, I think. She was
Marcella.
She was Marcella. Yeah. She's British. I'm pretty sure Toby Kebbell's British.
Yep. Yeah.
They're all doing American accents, and they all have a more natural way of speaking than Lauren Ambrose, who is American.
Yeah.
But again, we find out why she might be kind of like putting on a performance 100% of the time. So, who knows what happens in episode 10, or if they're going to get to do all 6 seasons of what they have in mind. But right now, if there's a show that is really pulling me in, that where I was kind of, when I caught up, I was bummed I had to wait for a new episode. And also, very digestible episodes. It's a bingeable show. The 30-minute installment. I don't know what made them realize they could do this in 30 minutes instead of an hour.
Yeah.
But I'm really glad because it has made the show a lot more fun. Those little capsules to watch, and you can just decide if you want to watch another one. But they don't draw it out, So
cool.
Servant.
Is it my turn?
Sure.
You guys are looking at me.
I just figured, go for it.
A morning show. Another Apple TV.
Damn, Apple
Plus
TV's hitting
show,
it hard on the
SchmeeVee.
SchmeeVee.
Fuckers. So, Okay.
I haven't started it yet. I can't speak to it.
Newsroom meets any morning show that you've ever seen.
Yeah.
It's like fast paced and the dialogue's pretty dense, and it's seeing the chemistry between the two stars.
Really, what makes morning show watchable, and this was a show that I would say, I don't know how I feel about the show, but the acting on it
Can't stop watching.
is incredible.
It's one of those shows. It's one of those shows that like. So that's my gauge, right? Like,
Yeah.
how often am I thinking about it? Am I rewatching episodes? Because there are scenes that are so uncomfortable, so well acted in the moment that I just cannot stop watching it. And then Steve Carell in this position where he's essentially Matt Lauer.
Yeah.
And
not playing like this is not a show that's trying to redeem that character at all.
No.
It's trying to like make it clear how we don't even want to see that person get a chance to redeem themselves. You know,
and it's a really sharp.
Not that they could.
I don't really see very many depictions of whatever it is. I mean, at some point, maybe 10 years from now, we can kind of look at what's happening. You know, people being held accountable for what's happened for what they've done. Right.
right. Imagine that.
I know. Imagine that. This stage where it has begun on a real accountability on some level, right? Having a show address that in a real way, I've never seen anything do it. Mm-hmm. And the way that it's being done now, and kind of this commentary of how men are in positions of power and how poorly they react to information about anything involving women's discomfort, lack of pay in a situation, or just general discomfort in positions that women are being put in. Having it being addressed in a real way, because it's unapologetic. Like, it really, people. I've read that there was some controversy because people were saying like the dialogue feels a little dated, but I think it's the opposite. I think seeing people react poorly is what it is. It's real. People are reacting poorly to information and saying terrible things and doing terrible things to women, and that needs to be highlighted.
Yeah.
And seeing it from this like top view, the way that it's being done, I think is kind of genius.
Well, when the show starts, it's not too different from the structure of Servant. You know what has happened.
Yeah.
But you don't know how it happened.
Yeah.
And then late in the season, I think it's around episode 9 or so, somewhere you get the moment where you finally see what really happened.
Exactly.
And then like outside of all that too, the hot button issue aspect, there's some characters, and I'll just say 2 words, Billy Crudup. What the hell, Ronald? Like, I've always sort of generally enjoyed him, never thought much about it. He's doing something amazing on this show.
He is dancing. I mean, that's the only way I can really describe what he's doing on screen. He is dancing.
There's like a light in his eyes and a
Unreal.
little grin. There's moments where everybody's in turmoil, but because he's kind of like a network executive, he sort of sees the potential ratings in this, and he's like, yes. I mean, and you would think you would hate this guy, but he's got layers to him, and he's not just... He does seem like there's some part of him that wants to see the old guard go. And you don't know if the kind of shit that happened in the past of the show would have happened on this character's watch. So you feel like he might be a different animal as far as the executives, but he's also a white male studio executive. So he kind of represents, at least in the beginning, the enemy, you know. So it is interesting to see that character sort of, as you said, dance between being a villain and a good guy. And then you start to realize maybe there's no such thing on this show. We're making it sound very high-minded. It's not. It's very pulpy almost, kind of soap opera-ish, but it's elevated by everything about the production value. So
It is, yeah. Morning show. Check it out, please.
I just got the Apple TV subscription a couple weeks ago. So, like, actually, like, literally on Christmas. So, the first
What are you watching the Apple TV on? You watching on your Roku?
Yeah, that and the iPad.
How's it run on a Roku? Because I haven't talked to anybody that runs it on a non-Apple TV.
I mean, to my experience, fine. I mean,
That's really cool.
It seems like it doesn't run on every Roku, because I have a Roku in one of the bedrooms that is like the one you can do like the wireless audio like to your AirPods through.
Right.
And it doesn't work on that one.
Oh.
Like, it won't install on it.
That's weird.
Yeah. But no, overall, it's been fine.
Got you.
But yeah, I don't know. The first one I jumped in on when I got it was wanting to watch Servant, just for the M. Night of it all. And, but that's the next one I want to check out, is Morning Show.
Cool.
So I guess the first one I'll pick, is Succession.
Okay, cool.
This is one that I kind of slept on the first season and kind of came to it late. But
everybody seems to say it really took off in the second season too.
It's weird. It did, but I mean, like, it just like the train wreck is just you can't not watch it.
Yeah.
Of this family like slowly imploding and just kind of heading towards like the ultimate. And season 2 ends on like this kind of event that I'm describing, like this. Like what do you call it? Like a division point or whatever. Mm-hmm. But basically, like I'd heard so many great things about the show. When Thrones ended, and HBO is kind of rolling out what's going on. What's our big show now? It's one of the ones that they are really championing, like this one and like I guess Westworld for returning series rather.
Yeah.
So yeah, we took the opportunity to catch up on season 1. I think we finished that season out maybe at the end of its run, and then season 2 we watched as it aired and got into that feeling of like, oh man, like this once a week thing is like, it's really exciting when the show is exciting and like everyone's talking about the show.
It is.
Yeah.
And that's one of the shows that like, in whatever bubble I live in, with film Twitter that I follow or like my friends and family or coworkers
it took off in memes this season.
Really what watch shows like this. It's one of the ones that people were constantly talking about. I just think all the performances are amazing. The family, the Roy family is just like I said, it's like you kind of want to watch this family fail just because of how horrible they are in almost every way. Mm-hmm. But the characterizations and the narrative and just like the characters that you follow, you slowly find yourself aligning with some, like your team Ken or your team Roman or whatever it might be, or Tom. Like just all these really great characters, and and Brian Cox is the patriarch of the family. It's like it all just is simple. It's like who's going to take over the family.
Yeah.
But that doesn't go as planned when the takeover doesn't happen, and it just starts to spiral out from there. But yeah, it's just like the writing is just amazing, and I forget the writer's name. I know it's produced by Adam McKay, and I think he did a pilot, but I just find it addictive, and I don't know anything about being rich and like corporate America and like media conglomerates and that life of the 1%. But watching the 1% implode on itself at times, like in the most intimate of ways, like with the people that you brought into this world, it's just I just can't wait for the next season. Like I said, season 2 I think ends on an amazing kind of just demarcation point / cliffhanger / just like what the fuck is happening next moment.
Wow.
That, I mean, Jeremy Strong is just like my MVP of the show. I love everything he's doing. He is such a flawed character, just destroyed.
He's Kendall, right?
Kendall, yeah.
See, that's one that I watched a couple episodes of and just wasn't able to finish it up in time.
Mm-hmm.
But I liked what I saw of the first season, but it did seem like people's interest in it shot up. I wonder if kind of all shows, if they had a strong first season, the second season can really be off to the races because everything's established. But maybe people also, there was a void of like, what's that next great HBO show?
Totally, 100%.
And, with the kind of, this is kind of like, let's take that Game of Thrones idea that anyone can die, and transmit it over to this world or translate it over to this world that's more relatable and more realistic, but it still sort of has that kind of, people can get screwed and people can get ruined and people can be betrayed and everybody's kind of got their angle and their plan. So yeah, I agree with you. Jeremy Strong is such an interesting actor. I was really glad to see that he got a meaty character on this show.
Yeah, Sarah Snook, who plays Shiv, like the sole daughter of the family, she's such an interesting character too, because she kind of like straddles this line of coming from this family and being a part of this family, but she's like very liberal and like was a political correspondent, consultant for like a very democratic possible presidential nominee in the show. So it's really cool to watch like the clash even politically and with the echoes of the world that we live in now. There's a lot of like mirroring happening on the show, I'm sure intentionally.
Yeah.
But I think it's Jesse Armstrong might be the writer, showrunner.
That sounds
but just
sounds like a name.
Yeah, and well, they just won like I just saw them given like they won like the Globe like a couple weeks ago, and I like put a face to the name. Because I always like hear Adam McKay talking about him, but I never knew what he looked like. But they won like a Globe for like best drama or whatever.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, it's just I highly recommend the show. I can't wait for the next season. It does feel like that high quality HBO show where like it's all in the show. Like you're watching the best possible version of this story, and everybody that's on the screen working it is like Matthew McFadden's in it as like he's married to the daughter. He's like kind of this like country guy who married into the family and it's like kind of awkward and just like making sure he's taken care of through all this shit that's happening. It's just a great show, and it's a great example of like one that caught on enough, like you just said, the first season where it's like people start to swell around it, whereas like this is one of the next big HBO shows. Like this is going to be the big show, like come the Emmys, next year's Emmys. Like, they really hit a stride in the second season, and now everybody knows, most people know what Succession is. And if not even this season, Kendall had this like very viral, memeable thing where he like did this rap at his father's like party. And it's amazing. Like it's incredible. But Succession's on HBO. So if you haven't checked it out, I highly recommend it.
Cool. And we might be coming back to HBO later in this conversation, but that question I had in my head of like, what's HBO going to do now? Yeah. They feel like all these other services are coming up and Game of Thrones is gone and maybe they can't have this kind of critical mass anymore. And I would say I have thought of since then of like 4 or 5 brilliant shows they've had. Some that won't make my list. Maybe we'll get a chance to, chat about them at some point anyway. But like, just they definitely have a really interesting stable, and that quality control and that development cycle that they go through. I do think that still puts them apart from a lot of the other outlets they're competing with.
And talking with Aaron tonight before I came over here, it was like we were talking about a new show on HBO, The Outsider, which just premiered last week.
I'm so ready for it. I haven't watched it yet.
It's amazing.
Really?
It's fucking amazing.
No, it looks so damn good.
Check it out.
Dude, like Jason Bateman directs the first 2 episodes. Dude is like legit one of the best directors doing TV. Like he is amazing. He's in the show too.
Yeah.
But the first 2 episodes he directed, oh my God, you guys are going to love it.
Okay.
But we were talking about this on the way over here when I was leaving the house, and it was like, she made a similar comment where it's just like, it really just feels like in HBO, it's like the quality over quantity, where like everything they put out, most of it's at least very good.
Yeah.
Where like Netflix, no criticisms because I'm a Netflix fan. Like it's just tons and tons and tons, and some of it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know? And that's the key. Like it's just, there's so much at the wall, and some will stick. But like HBO is so methodical in what they roll out, and what they really press and promote, and like kind of make sure
I'm laughing. I'm thinking of something you said once where you were talking, I think last time we talked about this, that HBO has created this idea that like they somehow are like white tablecloth dining of television, even though they're just like another channel and you pay money and you get it and anyone can get it. It's not cheap, but it's not super expensive. But it feels
people act crazy about it.
It feels sort of elite. And I was just thinking that like Netflix is one of those restaurants you go to where like the menu is 50 pages long.
Yep.
And it's like, wow, they have everything here. Whereas HBO is the kind of place you go and you find out what the specials are.
Right.
Well, but it is a little bit of quality over quantity. I think there is some truth to that. They do occasionally churn things out to the point where I'm surprised how many shows they have that just run for a few years, like Ballers or something that no one really talks about. But they do manage to have, if it's 2 or 3 shows within a year that people are talking about, like you were mentioning with Succession, that's better than a lot of places can hope for.
And the main difference when you discuss it is that the way they roll them out, those shows stay relevant longer.
They are.
And that's like one slight. It's not slight actually. It's a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah.
Like when you discuss the streaming model versus the week by week basis, and some of the streaming platforms are changing that so that they do deliver content that way, but a Succession or a show or 2 that we'll discuss later on the podcast, it stays in a conversation for 2 months, 3 months, because you have to wait for it.
Yeah.
And that makes that show relevant, and that makes that show, like when we come to a year end, like what show did I think about for 3 months? Oh, in this case, maybe Succession for me. While I love Stranger Things season 3, it was just off the edge of my list. I love that show. That show felt like it went away in a week.
Yeah.
Which is absurd, because it would not have had it probably been in this model.
Especially because, and I'm going to make a bold theory that you can't prove or disprove, but I think that the longer you're around as a binge model show, the less eventful it is.
Absolutely.
And the longer you're around as a non-binge model show, the more eventful.
It's inverse. You're 100% right.
Somehow, Stranger
That's
Things
been scientifically
3,
proven.
People were like, "Oh, we loved that. That was a pretty good season." A lot of people didn't like season 3 of Stranger Things, but a lot of people thought it was the best.
I don't
one.
like those people.
I'm kind of one of the people who thought it was the best season.
I kind of loved it.
But I I think we've talked about this every time we've talked about Stranger Things, of like, that's how you're supposed to say the name Stranger Things. You're supposed to
Stranger
do an episode,
Things.
Stranger Things. That, like, I sometimes have to stop and think, how would I be enjoying this if it were week to week, if it were episode to episode? And every now and then you notice that Stranger Things had a good episode.
Yeah.
But most of the time I don't notice a good episode on that show. I just notice, oh, that was a cool scene, and I might look and see, oh, that was in episode 4 or 5. But every now and then you notice, like, from beginning to end, there'll be some thematic material or a little mini arc that gets tied up, and you'll go, oh, that was a good episode of television. Yeah. I don't often have that thought when I'm watching Stranger Things of, like, that was an episode of television. I think of it more like that was a chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
This and there's the weekly model does keep the conversation. Everybody's talking about the same thing.
Well, Mandalorian had an opportunity to reign over people's consciousnesses. Consciousnesses. Wow, that's a word you should
consciousnesses.
People's consciousnesses for a long time because of that.
Here's the thing: if someone brings up Stranger Things season 3 to me right now, I will tell them to shut up.
It's like, get out of here.
Yeah. What? Why didn't you watch it when it came out? Like, that's the problem with it. You know what I mean?
If they're watching it now?
If they're watching it now.
Yeah,
if somebody comes to you, Steven's like, episode 3 of season... You'd be like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, I got you.
First and foremost, get out of my face. Yeah. But there's something about it happening weekly that keeps the conversation kind of uniform. Everybody's
It's interesting because I feel like a lot of people are talking about that, like in the industry that I follow.
Yeah,
it's messing with people.
And I feel like something's going to change in the next year or so at Netflix, where some of this is going to change because I think that they're seeing.
Yeah,
there's something happening with that, like especially with their flagship shows, that they want that sustainability or that like kind of long lead stuff, like. Mm-hmm. I don't, or maybe they kind of like drop a couple episodes and then like Outsider on HBO, they did the first 2 episodes and then it'll be one a week. Mm-hmm. You know, some of the shows are doing that where they drop the first 2 or 3 and then they pan it out over the next like 5 or 6 weeks, which seems pretty smart now that now that I think about it.
I want to point out that I said something about this quite a while ago.
Okay, your check's in the mail, Ronald.
But
it's actually just like a play check.
No, I'm serious, man. Like I'm glad that you guys see the value in both, because like sometimes you talk to some people and they're just like, why would I ever want to wait for? That's why I wait till the end of. But you never get to talk about it. I mean, not to be.
It's like a catch-22.
You mean if someone waits to the end of the season so they can watch it all at once, right?
Yes, and that's like if. The idea is like you're watching something and it's a community thing. Like it's like there's something to it. I'm not saying that.
That's the key, is that it's got to be that level show though. And I don't know how you know that going into it.
Right.
It's got to be that show that it's worth the wait.
Yeah.
Where it's that good. Yeah. And it's also like you want to just like sit in what you just watched for a week and talk about it with your friends.
They have to give you so much that at the end of an episode, you're going like, I don't know that I would have wanted any more than that.
Right,
to chew on,
exactly.
You know?
Yeah. Exactly. It can't be like, I don't know that every show I watch on Netflix that I love, that'd be like, I'd like to watch that once a week. No, I'll watch that one, and I don't know how you decipher it, but I think there's probably some sort of like, hierarchy that these net platforms have to be making where they know that this show, and I didn't watch it yet, but like, you talk about something like The Witcher, like that's a big show for Netflix. There's got to be some sort of long-term forecasting where like, this is one that we should have rolled out weekly because people were like blowing up shit the week it came out. And 2 weeks later, I mean, remnants.
Yeah.
It's like, now they're promoting Narco. It's like, what's the next show? Like they didn't like that would serve them better, I think.
Yeah.
But not to get too far on that. Let's keep this going.
No.
Ronald's got places to be.
It's a good conversation.
I will just throw this out here. What We Do in the Shadows, the FX show. What a funny damn show. And I was gonna put a concept that did not have to be made into a show, and you kind of don't want it to be. But then when you hear who's on it, if you know who Matt Berry is, if you know who Mark Proch is, you kind of start to go, okay, well, maybe this is going to be pretty interesting. And as it stands, it's a great extension of that movie universe because it's in universe. Like they've made it clear that this is connected directly to the movie What We Do in the Shadows. It's just not concerning any of the same characters. So it's a cool way to do a spinoff. or to do a television adaptation. They didn't recast any characters. They didn't take the dynamic of that movie and change it around for a show. They just said, let's have a different group of vampires. They're in the States.
Right.
They add the brilliant idea of an energy vampire, Colin, who when he's like feeding and he's got his like eyes big and his mouth. No, I just love the concept of that. Like the fact that you can take the silliness, the supernatural aspect of it is played somewhat straight, and yet these are silly characters.
Yeah.
And then there are a few very funny extensions of like what vampire powers would be. The idea of the social vampire who comes up to you and starts telling you a boring story about his weekend, and you just are drained afterwards. That's brilliant. You know, that's something that's very true. And even at his office there was an emotional vampire that he was like, she's good because she's like telling sob stories about her life. He would. I think what was it? He came up to somebody's cubicle and they were already drained.
Yeah.
And he noticed there's someone new. Anyway. That banality mixed with the sort of genuine mythology they're building out with the vampires and the kind of hierarchy of what they're supposed to be doing. The idea that they're sort of an outpost in the United States, they were supposed to be taking over, and they have like been here for 100 years or something, and they've maybe taken over. There's like a few blocks that they've become dominant over, and that the idea that there would be other vampires higher than them that are like, if we're going to bring somebody in to do the job you can't do.
Yeah.
I don't know. The promise of that getting more and more arcane and more detailed is very funny. But what you're really clocking in for are those characters, Nadja and Laszlo. In that first season, their romance. It's another great story where throughout the season you have certain assumptions, and then at the end of the season you see that they were telling you a love story about those characters all along. Yeah. I love that kind of sort of secret long planning that you can do with this type of show. So it's serialized, but week to week it doesn't feel like they're laying down track for this ponderous giant story. It just feels like a sitcom, and it is. In the tradition of kind of mockumentary sitcoms like The Office or Parks and Rec or whatever, where you can have characters kind of just talking to the camera. That is a great venue for comedy because you can have them just explain something really crazy. But I feel like this show does it in an artful way. They don't overuse that type of gag where the only thing that's funny is because the talking head set up something you're about to see. Yeah. But yeah, it sort of got in under my defenses. I didn't really want to see them take that movie and spoil it, but if they're gonna build it out, this is a great example of how to do it right.
Yeah, Matt Berry in a U.S. show,
his delivery style is so great.
I watch everything that he does. I watch every Toast of the Town. I watch everything that Matt Berry touches, and he's so good in everything. So my pick
is your number 2.
My number 2.
Okay.
Is actually a cartoon, one on a network that I don't think that anybody has right now, and that's DC Universe.
Okay.
Man, the Harley Quinn show is some of the best writing right now, period. And the concept is super forward-thinking, I dare say feminist.
Yeah.
So the concept is basically that Harley Quinn is constantly getting abused by Joker. He punches her in the face. He dumps her. He leaves her in situations to get in trouble. She gets thrown in Arkham Asylum constantly, and he's free. And then one day she has this change of heart where she decides that she kind of wants to break free. Mm-hmm. And she tries her best to break free, but she needs some help. And Poison Ivy, who later becomes her best friend, kind of talks her through this whole situation. And it's kind of this really cool look at a woman finding her identity outside of a man. Mm-hmm. It's super cool, really vulgar, really funny. And
the voice cast, I keep hearing cool people that are on it.
Ron Funches is one of the characters.
Alan Tudyk.
Jason Alexander. It's just a really well-voiced show, really well-written.
They seem to be doing that with the character of Harley Quinn in the new Birds of Prey movie, too, where they're trying to get her out of the shadow of not just the Joker as a character, but this toxic relationship where she's kind of the victim.
So there's one thing I want to also include, so there's a lot of really interesting things, like she's trying to create her own group, and it's a bunch of misfits. One guy, and I think he's called the Psycho, or the Psychic, he gets kicked out of the League of Shadows because he was in a public fight with Wonder Woman and calls her a cunt on camera. And she gets canceled. And so he comes to
He gets canceled.
He gets canceled.
You sounded like you said she gets canceled.
No,
he calls her that and she gets canceled.
He gets canceled,
Whoa.
and then he comes to Harley
That's
Quinn's
unfair.
group, and basically is like a weird sort of asshole character that called Wonder Woman a cunt. It's just that kind of humor. It's just really well done.
I'm gonna have to put a warning at the beginning of this episode.
Yeah.
That word is a harsh one. It's funny that over in the UK, it's like calling someone a fucker.
Man. Yeah. It is.
But here, no. No.
No.
Oh,
No, I have not heard any. I mean, I haven't heard anything but good things about
so
that show.
good. It's so good. I
didn't know quite how adult it was, though. So it
so
sounds like
adult,
it's very
man.
adult.
It's like, oh.
What if it wasn't? No, it's for kids. It's the first kids show with the C word in it.
It's so vulgar. Yeah, but it's cool, man.
My next show is another HBO show. It's the Craig Mazin mini-series Chernobyl.
Yeah.
Oh man.
I don't know, man. I just love like historical, like just I don't know, not tell-alls, but like telling me so much I didn't know about something that I knew a little bit about. That's like this massive historical event. That's just you didn't know you wanted to watch 5 hours about Chernobyl and about the lead up to it and the aftermath and.
Oh, what a grim story.
Yeah, just some of the best performances on TV this year, and just like cinematography. Everything on this series is like top notch. Like again, another show that I'm sure Emmys, anything like that, like it's gonna be the thing you hear about a lot. Not that that's all that matters, but I'm just saying, consistent with the HBO quality conversation we just had. Another show that's just amazing.
And how much do you love that it's written by the Hangover guy?
It's weird, right?
I mean, that's so bizarre.
He's got this like whole new level of like everybody's talking about Craig Mazin, and
I think that show Script Notes, that podcast he does with John August, has a huge part of that because regardless of what you think of his resume, Craig Mazin is kind of a pinch hitter, and he's one of the few not maybe one of the few, but he's one of those super successful screenwriters who gets brought in to do doctoring on things, even though they don't like that term. And so, you realize that limiting him to the Hangover guy, I was saying that semi-facetiously, but he would be the first person to point that out, that like the unlikeliness that he gets this kind of material. But it's so interesting that it's such a writer-driven show. Yeah. I know that kind of... That caused some backlash on True Detective when people thought Nick Pizzolatto didn't quite have the goods. But in this case, all 5 hours of that show were written by him. And I think the amount of research he did, I know he was working on it for a long time before he did it. Yeah. So I think if you get a writer who really knows what they're doing and they get a subject like that, obviously that a 5-episode miniseries, what a great format, that it can be really however long the story needs to be.
All these characters, I don't. I mean, I guess there's only a couple shows I can really compare it to. Like, I guess like The Wire, the way that The Wire really doesn't omit anybody's story. Like everybody's a part of the story, and seeing how they weave together is just really well done. I care about everybody in the story, even the assholes, even the people that are like doing the terrible things,
right? Making
the terrible calls. I'm like, what?
Well, I mean, The Wire, like the main character is McNulty is the lovable asshole, you know what I mean? But to see a story like Chernobyl where there is, and I have heard some talk about how accurate some of the stuff is. I think maybe, as with all things, they've simplified things to make it digestible for a show.
Like the Emily Watson character is like a person, and it was not like a person that was kind of in the science world of it. But
but still, like that idea that you could make it an entertaining show with actual characters in it and not just be feeling the weight of the awfulness of what's about to happen. That's really special. I need to finish that. I only saw the first couple, but I have to say I was not in the mood for it when it was happening. I was like, I need to step back. I was just, during the middle of the remodel. I was in a rough place. I didn't need to be depressed. Right. But the craftsmanship is just amazing.
Yeah, and I mean the direction, the cinematography. I mean, it's just that quality. I mean, that's on my mind right now. Just talking about these shows, just like the quality of the production and just like all of the performances. Stellan Skarsgård, Jared Harris, I mentioned Emily Watson, Jesse Buckley.
When have those guys not been good?
I know, but it's just like seeing them together on the screen together and like making characters that you kind of feel like this can't be a good character, but then there's a little bit of good in all these characters of sorts. Most of our main characters, at least. Yeah. But yeah, I just I'm a sucker for like a really intriguing and interesting like true story narrative, and especially when it's kind of handled with such care. Like you said, it's obviously that there was like tons of research that went into this. The companion podcast that was airing, the HBO put out for it was just amazing. I mean, just like more and more, just like mind blowing information.
They're doing a great job with that, by the way.
Yeah,
with that aspect of Like, I mean, it's like the A24 podcast, where it's like you get these people, these conversations. I listened to the one you recommended with Paul Thomas Anderson and the Safdie brothers. But yeah, these shows where they just, it's like, I guess podcast being part of the marketing for a show like that, it's not surprising that they would know it, but to do a good job with that as well, it's like yet another quality control thing that they're doing. It's like getting the right people to talk about.
Who did that? Was it John August that did it with him? Who was on the Chernobyl one?
I don't know who. I don't think it was John August, but I can't remember who it was.
I forget who hosted that one. But yeah, he's on it. Craig Mazin is on it, obviously. But
he's on it.
Yeah, Chernobyl was just phenomenal.
Close to perfect. I'd say like it's 5 hours of perfection. It's so well done. And
some of the visuals just like I can't even wrap my head around like what happened. You know, like you read it in textbooks growing up. Yeah. But the way they showed it in the show, like the visuals of the Reach and like the scene of them on the bridge when the ash is like it's like snow. It's like this melancholy scene. And it's like what's actually happening there that these people don't know. Like that scene specifically, like just fucks with me still.
Yeah.
And to know like how many people far, far, far away from where it happened are still affected by it. It's just wild.
Yeah, it's rough.
And really sad, but it's a really well made miniseries, limited series, whatever they call these. Again, from HBO.
Well, my final pick is gonna keep the HBO love going.
It's probably all of our number one, right?
Yeah.
Did we all have the same number one?
Yeah.
Is this the first? No, but is this the first time this has ever happened?
No
but is this the first time this has happened?
I think so.
Let's say it together.
Check the tape.
May have had for movies. Do we have one?
I don't know. Maybe.
No, but not for TV.
Probably not.
Let's just say it together. 3, 2, 1. Watchmen. There you go. If we tried to do that on the phone, the delay would have staggered.
Well, that was my setup for Watchmen. Was Craig Mazin actually hosts the Watchmen pod?
I honestly was about to say that, and then I realized, wait, I'll back off.
I'm glad you pumped it out. Yeah.
But that podcast was great too, and I will say that, like at this point, I think Damon Lindelof has kind of redeemed himself. If we want to consider him to be the guy who can't stick the landing, let's just stop saying that.
Yeah,
because,
I love Leftovers. I mean, I thought that. Well, show was
I think it was Lost plus him being brought in as a big high-profile script doctor to fix Prometheus, and then that movie was, a bungled job of answering questions that people have been asking, which is what people didn't like about Lost. I actually feel like I've been revisiting Lost kind of in little dribs and drabs, and
really.
I think Lost is underrated. I think
Lost is underrated too.
I think that what Lost did has such a heavy influence on storytelling today.
Oh, yes.
And the way that Watchmen, an episode of Watchmen, I know that Leftovers came between these two shows, but I'm going to throw back to Lost. The way that Watchmen reminded me of Lost, the way that you would like get to know a character in their present day self, and then you get that piece of their story.
Yeah.
And it's like, I might not see that character again for that amount of time in this whole season, but I now see everything they do as weighted by their past, by seeing, again, origin stories, They can be cheesy, but Damon Lindelof, I think he's fascinated with origin stories, and I think he's damn good at them. I think this idea that these characters become so much more poignant when you see what made them who they are, and then you see what they're up against. But then Watchmen also has a great story, an ongoing just 9-episode story. Like that's another thing. This is 9 episodes. That's not designed to set up a second season, even though it totally does. But it is set to be like a miniseries. It's a sequel to the graphic novel.
Yeah.
I feel like you could prepare for this show by watching the movie, except there's a point where that movie would fall off from it being an indicator, because the way the Watchmen movie resolves is not related to the graphic novel, but this show picks up exactly as though the graphic novel is set in stone.
DC made that motion comic that you can watch. Yeah. There's a motion comic of each comic book issue that you can watch. One person voices all the characters. But it's really good. It's really good. Yeah. It's just somebody reading all the panels from the comic. That I would say, if you want to start with something, watch the motion comic.
Yeah, because I watched it with my wife, who does not know Watchmen, and I found that it was a little. She really loved the show, but I did find myself going, you don't have to know all this. But I do think it's better if you know the implication of some of that stuff.
Right.
But I think very quickly this show sets up its own stakes. Damon Lindelof does have a writer's room, and supposedly it's a very diverse writer's room. I think you can feel that in this show. The way that it deals with certain subjects. He's come out and said he's still the point man. He's still the name that I mentioned first. He's still the guy who goes and does the podcast and the interviews. But he's very quick to mention that a lot of the best stuff that rings so true, he's freely admitting that if you look at who that person is that co-wrote each episode with him, that's sort of who those are the names you might want to watch as far as who's getting staffed on other shows or maybe continuing to work on this, because there was a lot of people who I think affected how great this show was, just from the writing to the acting and the filming, the effects. And it's, again, we've been saying all along, the HBO production value. This is like a crazy thing. If this is what DC is going to do with their television offerings with this new HBO Max partnership that we've talked about,
what the hell?
I mean, it's like the sky's the limit with the kind of stories they'll be willing to tell, and that's the one thing you can't say about the Marvel Disney continuum is that they wouldn't have gone as deep and done something as, not that this is quite a DC property, but I'm just saying it's on that line. It's comic booky. I think that property. I don't think that you can see this kind of bold storytelling in many other places. It's pretty impressive.
I'd be worried that I wouldn't expect much like all of the DC properties that they're doing to be anything like this.
Yeah, I mean,
mainly because of what this source material is,
right?
But yeah, it is an interesting outlet to see what HBO or DC lets them do with whatever other series they might.
Well, I mean, the Joker this year, or Joker as a movie this year, was very very adult,
right? Sure.
So I guess what I'm saying, it's just the notion that they're trying to maybe set themselves up as apart from that house style that we keep referring to that the Marvel stuff has. This is a different kind of comic booky. This is definitely for adult audiences, Yeah. But it's also got that pulpy, crazy sci-fi aspect to it that really does help me watch what would otherwise be a kind of intense drama.
Making a direct sequel that's really very loyal to the source material. Fuck my mind. Like, they didn't really say. Like, they were just like, this is what, these are a bunch of characters.
No, they were very vague. And they would say, it's kind of a reboot, it's kind of a sequel, it's kind of a reimagining, and you were like, what the hell is this?
Yeah, they were super vague. So as I'm watching the first episode...
Spiritual sequel is what they were saying.
Yeah, so as I'm watching it, I'm like, the first episode, I'm like, this could still be a prequel, maybe. It could be something. It could be a reimagining, right? Okay. But then, like, as it went on, I'm like, oh no, this is a real sequel.
Well, there's a moment, I think in the 5th episode, whichever episode it was that focuses on Tim Blake Nelson's character, they finally commit
to the
image that is the closing gambit of the graphic novel.
Yeah.
And you realize how directly they are sequelizing that graphic novel, which is, again, the movie didn't even commit to that idea. Yeah. I think what the movie did was... I understand why Zack Snyder changed it. I always have loved the sort of improbability of what happened in the comic. I love that this show just picks right up with that aspect of it. It's still related to sort of pseudoscience, but it's got this otherworldliness to it, and the fact that there's a scene. Is that in the first episode, or when the rain happens?
Yes.
Yeah.
So that right there, if you didn't know that, if you didn't catch the context of that, you'd be thinking, what the hell's going on? Is this like Magnolia with the frogs? But no, Tim Blake Nelson, I already mentioned. Regina King is incredible. I mean, she's been building this awesome resume for a while, but I was sincerely blown away by just how she was able to...
She's at the height of her powers right now.
Right.
And she should be.
Yeah, she is.
She's amazing.
She's acting her ass off in that show. And Yaya... the gentleman, I don't want to say...
Abdul Mateen?
Yeah. The guy that...
Her husband.
Yeah. Yes. Everybody's firing on all cylinders. Every character. And...
Plus, he's got the confidence, like in social media and in his career right now, of being a guy who was in a great show that everyone loved. Yeah. And who also everyone knows you got a nice dong. There's nothing he can't do.
It's very true.
But that character, Cal, that he plays, and how that evolves, I mean, oh my God... There's some stuff in that storyline that is unbelievable, and there's a moment where I didn't just cry. You and I, Steve, we talk about crying. I didn't just cry
all the time.
We do. We have a separate group, Ronald. You don't know about. It's just the tears.
It's just tons of tears emojis.
That's all we do.
There's no words.
Just tears.
But there's a moment I'll just say in the 8th episode, there's a badass action scene.
Yeah.
A fight scene that has got such huge emotional stakes, and it has followed a huge emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
I didn't just like cry. I was like, I went like, oh, I made like, I like moaned because I knew what was about. I could see where it was going, see what was going to happen. But there's this moment of, and I'll just, a character fighting for someone they love will almost always get me.
Oh, yeah.
And when you know the odds are crazy and they know the odds are crazy, but you still see them try it.
Yeah.
And they go out guns blazing.
Yeah, that's
I
really
think
nice.
that is so cool. But it's like,
is.
it gets me. It really gets me. I'm like, that is powerful. I mean, I love love stories when they're done in like these sideways aspects. And I think this is a great love story that builds up over the season of this show. And that moment pretty much the last scene in episode 8 is it was the pinnacle for me. After that, the last episode almost felt like a really good epilogue. Yeah. But that moment to me was like, this is when what's really at play in this story became clear. And I will just add also that just making white supremacists instead of communists the bad guys.
Yes.
Not only does it feel very timely, it's crazy to say this in 2020, but it actually was a bold choice to make white supremacists the bad
very
guys.
bold,
Like,
yeah.
I wouldn't have thought this a few years ago, but now I say, hey, saying that Nazis are bad is actually kind of a bold thing to do.
Yeah.
I thought that was really clever, but also it really, really hooked me and it really resonated.
Yeah. I think the idea that like there were some ideas that evolved from the comic book, like Dr. Manhattan and who he was, because it in the comic it kind of gave this idea of like one idea about this character and the depth that they add to all these characters. And the cool part about all of this is that if there is a next season, and he's kind of hinted that there will be another season.
What he said is he doesn't have an idea for it.
But did you hear
I would rather them wait. Come back 3 or 4 years from now with a really cool 9-episode season.
Did you hear what he said about not being involved in the next season? And
He has said that he could almost set it up like an anthology.
Give it to somebody else. Yeah.
That makes me super sad because I want him to touch it. And the idea that a person who happens to be white comes with this idea really lends itself to the idea that like there is some growth happening somewhere, you know?
Yeah, and it helps that he's like very outspokenly liberal, and like that comes from his character. And I was on the podcast that he did for HBO, like
Which
in every
with Craig Mazin.
and in every interview he's done, he credits a lot of the real idea about the Tulsa massacre and everything, and the whole idea of the reparations is from the case for reparations from Ta-Nehisi Coates.
A great
like that he read that
Baltimorean.
book and it was like that changed. That was the moment. That's the idea
Right.
for the series. That's the idea of how I bring Watchmen into today and whatever.
So, I mean, if he has to go off and have that
Exactly.
epiphany again
That-
in a year or so,
If
I'm
that's
fine
what he
with that.
means, take the time.
Take that
I
time.
would be fine with no more. But I also think if you're talking in TV language,
Sure.
he said he had lunch with Tim Blake Nelson. You may have heard this.
Yeah,
I think
I
it was
did.
on the
I
podcast.
did see that, yeah.
And he said that he said that people think the ending is a cliffhanger, but it's not. And that Tim Blake Nelson said, "Are you fucking crazy?" That's
the best cliffhanger
That's the best
ever.
cliffhanger ever. People, but it's like the question of there's a character who's going to be dealing with a new status, and how that character will handle that status does sound really interesting. I would like to see it.
Yeah.
However, if I never saw it, that's in my mind.
Yeah.
And that makes it a great ending. So it's a great lead up to whatever comes next, but it's also, I believe him when he says that he intended that to be the end of his idea for a sequel to Watchmen. And I do think people feeling like endings that are ambiguous are setting up more stories. I feel like that's a symptom of our franchise era that it's like sometimes an ending
Which
is
he has a
ambiguous.
big hand in, though.
No, he does.
You
He
know,
does.
and he's part to not to
No, he-
blame for
yeah.
that, but he's made that bed. So
Right,
you
but
know.
I'm just saying I can believe that you would set out to make something like this, and maybe something like Fargo, that model, where a year or two between seasons is not going to hurt people's investment.
Yeah.
I think that is a wise way to go.
Without giving anything away, the idea that like so the Watchmen had a story within a story, the idea that they have another story within the story, like that is kind of more on the nose than the previous story within the story, and it's done so fucking well.
Yeah, in the original one, there's a pirate comic.
Yeah, it's a pirate, and this is a little different.
This is like a television show, but it's very what's cool about that is it does fill in a bit of the history. For the people like my wife who maybe could have watched the show without knowing the details of the last one. But it's still, even within that, I think this is a show that 2-3 weeks in, if you're watching, I binged like the first 8. Mm-hmm. So I came in. I only watched the last one on the regular timetable. I do think this would have been a satisfying watch week to week because it gave you something to kind of simmer with. But I also think I could see a casual viewer thinking this is the most confusing show I've ever seen.
Yeah,
but it's just because it's kind of smart and it moves really fast. Watching it a second time with Nikki, I found how I was almost struck by how it does spell things out, like how much it does hint and how much it does come out and tell you things. Yeah. It's like one of those things where the second time through you almost go, wait, is this spelled out more than I thought it was? But I think it's just the gift of this kind of storytelling is the second time through, you see everything they're doing to basically point at what's happening.
Yeah.
But the first time through, it's also interesting. You don't know what that means.
I guess the what a ton, the how could never have imagined. Yeah. Like I love that was a thing. Like if you follow, if you could follow the story well enough and if you're listening enough, you can figure out some things. But the how, you would have been in that writer's room. Like there's no way you could have guessed how some of that stuff came to be. So I think it's
a perfect show.
Yeah,
like you mentioned you said about Chernobyl and Near Perfect. This is a perfect show.
I think
like
so too.
the playing with time, like with the Ozymandias character and like what's happening with that character, and I just love the idea of there being all these, the symbolism of a clock and the ticket, like all these things that were used in the marketing for the movie, and slowly is doled out through the season or through each episode. It's like a drug. I mean, like to me at least, and I'm familiar with the motion comic, Zack Snyder film. Mm-hmm. But even knowing that stuff, like the different things that they were doing with this show in this modern quote unquote version of it or sequel version of it, like it was just so creative and there's so many characters to follow and every character pretty much gets an amazing wrap up for their story for this season or for this series if it never comes back.
Right.
And
Gene Smart is amazing.
Yeah, Gene Smart and Lou Gossett Jr.
One of the best uses of Jeremy Irons in
Jeremy
years,
Irons,
too.
like
Jeremy Irons, man.
Everybody. I mean, I don't think there's a weak link in the series.
There's not.
There's a scene in the first episode, I guess, where he's brought a cake that was made very poorly, we can imagine, by these people that don't quite understand human taste buds. He does. It's always funny to me, but he does a great job of it within a very dramatic show. I just ate something that tastes terrible and I'm going to try to be nice about it face. I don't know why that always gets me, but like that little moment was so like his plotline is so crazy and funny and silly and weird and dark at the same time. Yeah. And the way it builds, it's really the most strange factor on the whole show. Yeah. But even that, when it comes together and you see what's really going on, there's a flashback to Dr. Manhattan's childhood that explains something about the situation that Jeremy Irons is in. And it was touching as fuck. Like there's these two characters that you don't even really know. You're not even looking for the origin of them. And you find out where they come from. And it was a great, I don't know, real humanity coursing through this sci-fi, if you want to call it that. Yeah. And the fact that it's about those characters and their emotions. I heard Damon Lindelof say something on a Lost podcast recently. There's a show called The Storm where they are recapping it week to week. And they'll have someone on to do an interview. And he said something that's just great. And I can't remember who he said it in context with. It was somebody else that I think I would say the same thing is true of them. But he said that one thing they held true to on Lost is that the best answer to any mystery is a great character. Mm. Wow. And you can really see that on Lost, sometimes almost to a fault because it was great characters, but the storyline got a little out of control. But I love that notion of a storyteller who's going to root things that happen in human emotions and human experiences. Yeah. And this show is a great example of that. You really do feel like every time there was a big mystery, when it was revealed as part of somebody's story, somebody's very specific story. So
I wouldn't be surprised if this gets translated to a comic. Like
that would be really funny if it got adapted back in, or if they took this world and like started spinning out of it. Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised if that's just like somebody just translates it to panels.
You know who won't do that? Won't be part of that? Alan Moore, the guy who created Watchmen. Although co-created. Dave Gibbons, the artist. I mean, I love comic book writers. They come up with these great ideas, but the people who put in most of the hours are the artists. Dave Gibbons is participating in the show. I think he's always been much more ready to play ball with Hollywood.
Well, didn't like the picture of Ozzy? Didn't he do that? Like this, like the big picture. Yeah. So That makes sense to me.
But Alan Moore just doesn't. I mean, I can understand his whole thing about comic books being like storyboards for movies. He's just offended at the notion that when he does a great comic, people are going to say, "Look, it's ready to be a movie," as though that's some step up from being a comic. I think he wants to say this is the finished work, you know. But we live in a world with people have eyeballs and people like movies.
Yeah, people like things in motion.
So they're going to take great stories and adapt them. But I understand his position, even if I feel like, does that mean he could never appreciate something like this? Maybe he could, because it's not really based on his writing. Anyway.
Yeah. Interesting. So that's it, right?
Yeah. So what shows are you guys looking forward to right now? I want to just say right now, The Outsider is the thing I've been looking the most forward to, and I can't wait now that once we've recorded our look back episodes, I can catch up on a few new things. And The Outsider, I'm really excited about. Also, Fargo season 4.
Can't wait for that.
Just put out a trailer that looks just unbelievable. Yeah. What is this show going to be?
Jason Schwartzman.
I know.
And Chris Rock being.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was going to say Jesse Buckley's, who I've come to love this year, is in it also.
I saw Jason
plays the
Schwartzman.
nurse.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I saw Jason Schwartzman out when I was working at XM. He was promoting I Heart Huckabees, our theme.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting
And
enough.
he was outside in DC.
Do you know how many people think I made that music? Like people that I talk to that listen to the show.
That's so cool.
That are like, I thought that, but because it kind of is in the neighborhood of something I might do.
Is.
I always take it as such a compliment. But
Yeah,
I'm like,
that's
but
a
that
really-
means our secret source is, like Spotify has some algorithm where it scans podcasts for copyrighted material. So maybe way down the list is let's protect the copyright of I Heart Huckabees. I always like to think that one day John Bryan would be recommended to listen to our show and then would hear his music.
Wait a second.
But yeah.
Watchmen.
What else is there? Anything else coming up?
Oh,
Better
yeah.
Call Saul comes
Looking
back next
forward.
month.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Better Call
can't
Saul.
wait for that.
Atlanta was supposed to come out 2020, but
Not
they're
happening.
pushing
Yeah.
it.
I'm pumped for Ozark. I loved Ozark.
Ozark was good.
I need
man.
to catch up on that.
Yeah, I would if you could, especially because I'm just like banging the Jason Bateman drum.
Well,
Like,
I mean, I was really glad to
he
hear
won like
that.
the best director at the Emmys this year for Ozark.
Oh wow!
Which was a huge upset, specifically for the Game of Thrones director. I forget who can't remember his name right now, but Miguel Sapochnik was like the favorite, and Jason Bateman won for Ozark. And I mean, I don't know, man, he's legit, and I love Ozark, and it's coming. I think in is it March?
And you said
April?
Narcos is coming back too.
Narcos is coming back.
Is that going to be an all new crew this season?
It's the Mexico crew. It's a season of. It's like
it's those guys who rolled in at the end of last year. That was such a great setup.
Yes, that trailer looks great.
I wonder if that means Pedro Pascal won't be back. Oh, he's in the trailer?
No, he's not in the trailer, but I'm assuming you're right.
Okay.
Yeah. Although I don't know. I mean, he hasn't said anything. He is not a part of any of the marketing for it. I don't see him doing anything.
I would say
for
he's
it.
too busy with Mandalorian, but
Right.
there's talk that
Yeah.
there's a lot of scenes he's not even the guy in the costume.
The one scene he shot, maybe.
But I mean, we knew that about James Earl Jones all throughout
Sure,
Star Wars, and
sure.
that didn't make that any less his performance.
Who
But
fucking cares?
But I think the fact that I've been picturing Pedro Pascal under the armor is the difference there.
Yeah.
But I have heard some actors on that show report that he is on set, or he does do a lot of the interacting with people. But I wonder if that's like you'd want to be there for it, or if it's like if you're just going to be standing there and kind of shrug, then like, do you need me? I don't know.
Does he just stop it like, hey, I wouldn't do that. I lift my arm a little higher.
Oh, What We Do in the Shadows is coming back too.
Lovecraft Country.
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely
We're
excited.
taking this in, and I think we both have weird feelings about it.
I think it's a great premise.
Yeah,
And I think
it's-
in the hands of Jordan Peele and J.J. Abrams
Yeah.
and the other person that's developing the show, whose name escapes me, I think that it's a great setup. But the book is odd. It's hit and miss for me so far.
Yeah.
But I do think that
It's
like
nuts.
with the cast they've got and with the creators they've got, I think it could be a really exciting show. I would just hope that the show ups the sort of horror aspect, because in the book it's very much the case that the racism is is scarier than supernatural stuff, which is as it should be.
True.
But they are sort of missing the real nut of the kind of Lovecraftian horror, which has a lot more to do with atmosphere and dread, and a lot less to do with just like guys in robes and like cult members and stuff. But anyway, no, I'm really looking forward to that. So that's television in 2019. Anybody have any parting thoughts?
I love Sex Education.
Sex
on
Education was
Netflix.
really good.
That's coming back in like next month. Or this month. Next month. Or this
really
month.
enjoyed that show.
Love that series.
Did you see Tuca and Birdie?
No, I did not. That got canceled though, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it got
Yeah,
canceled.
I didn't get to watch that yet.
Pen 15.
Love that.
Yeah.
Godfather of Harlem. I was really into that.
I didn't see that one. I've heard that was good too.
Yeah, Forrest Whitaker acting his ass off.
There was something else that I just saw on the FX reel. Devs.
Oh yeah.
That looks really interesting.
That's Alex Garland, right?
Garland, yep.
Is he like behind the whole show?
Yeah,
Or?
yeah. So that's just what's coming up shortly that I'm pumped for.
And supposedly Disney Plus is stepping up the timeline on those Marvel shows, but they haven't said.
WandaVision's coming out this year.
But they haven't said when. I think they just wanted to get some announcements out because of the people jumping ship after Mandalorian wrapped up, and I think that is a danger when that's the main reason people were excited to sign up. So if they really do need to get, and I think we said this, they need to have something coming. They need to do the Netflix or HBO thing of overlap a little bit with something else people give a shit about.
WandaVision has to come out the first half of the year for it not to be a dip.
Not happening.
I was thinking
I know they said 2020, but I would stand
I bet it's fall.
shocked
if
it comes out.
Yeah.
I think it's going to probably come out after Black Widow's in like May, June, July. It's going to be after that.
Mm-hmm.
That sucks.
But what's odd is it's meant to set up the Doctor Strange sequel, which has just lost its director.
Shit happens, John.
I know, but that's odd that they're moving that forward, and that movie seems to now be more in flux.
But they haven't moved the date.
No, they haven't changed the date. That's crazy. That's like a year from now. Oh, not a year from now, but a year from when. Like they're starting shooting in the spring, and it's still set to come out a year after that. Yeah. So that is, but I mean that's actually even a short run, even for Marvel. A lot of times they announce something, and then you find out that it's not coming out for 2 or 3 years. But anyway, what do you guys think about that? Even though it's not television related, Scott Derrickson.
I think it sucks.
Yeah, like
it does suck.
It's like one of those examples of like you look at the Marvel in Phase 2, Phase 3. It's like these directors that they bring in, even though it's got this Marvel sheen or this Marvel veneer over it, they kind of bring on interesting directors that are kind of known in a certain genre or have that touch that they bring to the movie. And Scott Derrickson, coming from the horror genre, most of his previous work, if not all, Doctor Strange had a little bit of like that in there,
and the potential to go even harder into it.
And you hear the title of the next movie, and you're like, okay, he's perfect. He's gonna go. They're gonna go for it.
Madness, right?
In the multiverse, And but it's interesting. I mean, it's kind of a weird thing because like they brought on a different writer for it, and then like his co-writer from the first Doctor Strange wasn't involved, and
Robert Cargill.
Yeah, and like so I don't know if there's just like they're not whatever creative differences is what they say. But
right before he left the project, he tweeted that
deadline or something
that like
release dates.
Studio mandated release dates are the enemy of art. So I could see being in January of this year, and you're supposed to deliver a movie before May of next year. I could see being like, we don't have time to develop this and get it done right, Right. But mainly, I like the idea of sticking with the horse she rode in on to some extent. Like that, if this person brought Doctor Strange to this point where he's this now semi-recognizable or iconic character to people, why not let that person? Like I've always been happy to see Peyton Reed, be the person that they're talking about bringing back for more Ant-Man. They wouldn't have to do that. So it seems a little odd for them to do that. I wonder. They talk about it like it was mutual. I wonder how mutual it really was. But Scott Derrickson's presence on Twitter is just generally very positive and very sincere. And I just, I like that guy. So
as mutual as a kick in the balls.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'll get over it.
Yeah, that's weird.
You mean someone's foot might hurt if they kicked you in the balls? If they did it like barefoot.
Yeah.
That's it.
What?
Movie.
TV.
That's how we TV SchmeeVee.
That's how we end them now.
MovieSchmeeVee.com.
Yep.
Next episode is going to be our top films of the year.
Yikes.
That was 2019. And that'll be coming shortly. So stick around for that in your feed. It'll be out in a couple weeks. And
why don't we get it to him next week, Steve?
Maybe. We'll see how it goes.
Let's make sure it comes out in January.
We'll see.
Let's do it.
Yeah. That way, when February starts, we'll be ready to start a whole new looking forward shtick.
I like that.
You like that?
I like it. Okay, that sounds fun. That sounds good.
We just decided just now.
That's fine. That's fine. Do you have anything else?
I think that's it.
Cool. As always, you made our day. Thanks.
Bye.
Television. Give me cash and politician. Television.
3, 2, 1.
Watchmen.
There you go.